Yeah, so this is the second week of a course on solidarity, which is part of the Union Chapel Lent theme of faith under fire. Well, we've been looking at, or are looking at, challenges that are facing contemporary Christians. And they are big challenges. We've been looking at, well, issues of persecution of Christians. We've looked at growth of fundamentalism a little bit on Sunday morning in churches. We've listened to, on Wednesday evenings, we've listened to people who are putting themselves in really important locations to exercise their ministry. We listened to Bethan, who works at Praxis, and is a very committed Christian. We listened to a priest from South London who takes her prayer out into the streets with Christians for Climate Action, and an Afro-Caribbean gay priest from Manchester who is opposing gay conversion therapies and racism in the church. So we've listened to those voices already, and the idea of these sessions is to look at what the Bible is saying about the idea, the concept of solidarity. Because if we hear what's going on in the world and what's happening to people, we need to think about how we can be in solidarity with them. And looked at a particular story, quite a negative story, the story of Cain and Abel, and how just part of the early part of the book of Genesis, and how we came to the conclusion that, in order to, if I remember how we said it, yes, you are your brother's keeper. In order to have a brother, you need to be your brother's keeper. And the negative thing about the story of Cain and Abel is that this is not what we should be. This is not how we should be. We should be something else. And this week's title is God's Solidarity, and looking at really what the notion of covenant, which is absolutely intrinsic to the whole of the Bible story, starting in Genesis chapter 12, isn't it? When Abraham sets out, Genesis 15, when covenant is made with Abraham, right through to the gospel story and the new covenant, and the Eucharist, the communion. This idea of God having a covenant with people. But I thought we'd start not with covenant, we'll come to that in a minute, but looking at what some have described as the kind of metaphor for contemporary life. And I'd like you just to I'll just share some thoughts, and then you can perhaps reflect on this. And the idea is that contemporary life is not governed by the notion of covenant. It's governed by something else, which is contracts, not contractual relationships between people. That we, in our modern societies, we tend to view life as self-interest, and our relationships with others is motivated by fear of harm. So security becomes a big issue, and a desire for comfort. And contracts are those things which give us security and gain, and allow us to achieve what we want to achieve with the help of others, but we cannot achieve alone. If that's sort of making sense. And think about all of the way in which we structure our relationships. They're performance orientated. Did you do for me, what I did for you? And our commitment to people and to other people is limited, and it's limited to what it gains. And there are kind of terms and conditions which apply in society to how we treat and behave. And the moral obligation is not necessarily to fulfill the agreement that you make with another person, but at least to make good the losses if it doesn't work out. And so contracts become very reciprocal. We're in exchange with each other. And here's Neil. We as individuals, are always separate units. We are individuals, autonomous individuals. And the most sacred thing to us as human beings is the freedom to decide what to do and how to do it and who to do it with. We have autonomy over all of those things. And all that the contracts do is stabilize our commitments to each other and make them slightly fluid. Am I making any sense at all? Does that sound like a description of the way in which we live our lives? And perhaps you might even think of examples, of how that kind of works itself out.
Yeah.
I'm sure in the 1970s, the Labour Party, the government, then talked about the social contract, social compact.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was at school then, so I don't remember all the details, but I do remember that language being talked about.
Yes, social contract, yeah.
I don't know what happened to that idea, but after that.
Yeah. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Neil.
Yeah. And it is a kind of view of the self, isn't it? I mean, as human beings, we are autonomous, and we have the relationships we have with other people is, on an entirely contractual basis. I mean, that's marriage, is a contract. Employment is a contract. The old, even that the serfs, would be the obligation of the landowner if they weren't productive. They'd still be a moral obligation, that was different to the kind of modern contract that we have in employment today. So if somebody's been working in a place for 30 years, but they somehow have become redundant to requirements, they become redundant, literally, physically. And there is an argument that the more society is organized around autonomous individuals and this autonomous idea of self, the more possible it is for the state to take more authoritarian positions. This is Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes. The more self-governing the individual sees themselves, then the more Leviathan, the state, the big state, can move in. And actually, is that what we're seeing now in our society? That ability to just say no collectively is being undermined, eroded all the time.
I think that's really true. I mean, I'm so angry at the news today with the whole immigration policy, because I think that illustrates entirely what you've just said, Fawn. We get signed up to a Declaration of Human Rights that allows anyone from anywhere to claim asylum in this country. And now we're turning our back on it. And we even have a Prime Minister who says that's okay, it'll be legal.
Yes.
And he knows it isn't, but he can pander to, those who he needs to pander to try and cling on to power, to do that. But the worst thing about it isn't, I don't think, from a Christian point of view, I don't think the worst thing about it is what it's doing spiritually. I don't believe legally it will stand. I don't see how it can if we're signed up to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. There's no legal basis for anything that they're saying.
Right.
But what's happening in the meantime is this kind of authoritarian approach allows those who, like you said, want to believe themselves. I mean, it's a strange dichotomy, isn't it? Because you're right, we become more autonomous, or we think we do, until we can't be autonomous, and then we expect the state to bail us out. And I'm not using that in any disparaging sense, except that that's the language that those who view the state in that way would use it. Would say it's bailing people out. It's not bailing people out. It's a collective agreement that we look after those who need to be looked after, and those of us who are the strongest and fittest for the time that we are, play our role in that.
And they're not loved anywhere else. Nobody loves them. That's the trouble. Nobody loves them.
No. I know, and it's
and the contractual arrangements actually make everything really unstable. So if you take something like where people live, homes, housing, rather than that being, your right to have a space within a community, and the community's job is to ensure that everybody has somewhere comfortable to live, as a way of managing society, versus, you have a mortgage or a rent, and that's a contractual agreement between you and the landlord or the bank or whatever can take away that and leave you in a very, very vulnerable position. So every relationship you have becomes unstable.
Yes.
Even say the relationship of marriage, if the economic circumstances around that marriage are such, then and the other contractual things like employment, like housing, all those things which manage our society, if they're unstable, then so does the other thing become unstable. What you don't want is a situation where all our relationships are governed purely by self-interest. You want another quality of relationship there. I mean, that, if you think about the doctor-patient relationship, for example, I remember I was ill in hospital once, and I lost my eyesight, and was very ill with this, and I cannot tell you how much I think I fell in love with the doctor, because he was so caring and so sensitive and so, whatever. And then once I was getting better, the same doctor came to see me, and he was just saying, "Oh yeah, that's okay, very good, yes, making good progress," and walked away. And I felt slighted, because that relationship at that time had been so important to me, because you don't want all your relationships to be just business-like, contractual. You do want somebody at some point to be a bit more for you and care for you more,
Yes.
And he was absolutely right. He was very caring of me when I really needed it, and just kind of business-like when everything was going okay. Really, really interesting. So
A long time ago, but was that a long time ago? When was that?
That was a long time ago, yeah.
Okay.
So so there we are. I mean, that's the kind of critique, really, of this contractual society. And as we go on, I think we see that it's what a driver it is to who we are and how our relationships are formed. And I'm sure you can think of more and more examples of how that way of being. And so we contrast that with the relationship with covenants, and that's really what I want to try and tease out as the the biblical alternative to the contemporary society, and the characteristics of covenant. Well, a covenant can't be annulled. You can't get out of it easily. It isn't, terms and conditions. We have this agreement so long as, and it's a commitment to an enduring relationship. It's a long-term relationship, and relatively unconditional. It's open-ended. The obligations within it are kind of diffuse. It isn't just that I will do this if you do that. It's that we are together for whatever, which is a completely different way of entering into a relationship with someone. And it's about autonomy. It's about belonging. It's about being voluntary but also consensual. And it doesn't assume what is going to come in the future. Whatever relationship is, it's not specified in advance. And that morality, enters into it, and morality is really an important part of it. Does that sound like how you understand a covenanted relationship to be?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just thinking they're related. I'm just trying to think about the meaning of the word covenant. It's more than promise, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure in what way.
It's a morally binding relationship, and it's a deep relationship, and it's a relationship that is not bound in the same way by terms and conditions, but bound by a commitment from one to the other, or from one community to another, or whatever.
I mean, it's kind of like how, I guess, God exists in and with Israel.
Yes.
He belongs with Israel, and he almost belongs in it, and at times he shows up in Israel, and he does in our books as well. So.
Is it like the opposite of a contract, in that with a contract you're often looking for the get out clause? How can I, what can I do to miss my obligations or not fulfill them?
Yeah.
Whereas with a covenant, the intention's in the opposite direction. You're there more than you promise to be, because you can't promise. You don't know everything that's going to happen. You kind of just stick at it regardless. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, a contract would say how much notice you have to give to get out of this, or how much you have to pay if you want to end the contract. They'll be part of the terms and conditions. Whereas in a covenant, you have to resolve whatever goes wrong and stay within the relationship. You may change the nature of the relationship. Sorry, Harley.
Oh, I said, as is what happens in the Bible,
Yeah, exactly.
All the things that everyone gets wrong in the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Exactly.
Just before we look at a Bible passage or two, just some of the problems around with covenants. I mean, in a way, it kind of can get merged with the liberal idea of communitarianism, that the good of the community is more important than the good of the individual. I mean, that's a sort of communitarian idea. But the problem is you put a boundary around the community, and this is an issue for the churches, who claim to be inclusive. We've talked about that. You put a boundary around, and within that community, you've got a lot of strength. So you could argue that apartheid, South Africa, white South Africa, in the apartheid era, was a covenanted community. It was deeply committed to itself, its identity, and structured itself to keep others at bay, but would be very much linked to the Calvinist notion of a covenanted community, as were the Protestants of Northern Ireland. And the Puritans, the Pilgrim Fathers, a piece of whose rock we have in Union Chapel, those, they also very strongly linked to this notion of covenant, as are, Peter's and Sue's Baptist roots and our congregational roots. You have a covenant within a local church, but it puts a boundary around it. And the danger is that what happens in those kind of communities, like the United States, South Africa, apartheid South Africa, Protestantism in Northern Ireland, is that you turn what is a practical, moral category of a community holding together and doing things together into a theological category. So the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants of the United States are, representatives of God, in that country, and defending in God we trust kind of idea. South African apartheid South Africans believe they'd been led by God into that land, to save the Africans, and the Protestants in Northern Ireland would believe that God was, wanting them to be there and to defend the true religion against it. So there's dangers in the notion of government.
Some communities can be toxic too, can't they? Even when they're set up.
Yeah. Good communities can be without realizing it.
Absolutely.
You could see covenant behind what's going on in Israel-Palestine at the moment.
Oh,
That's what about historically
much.
The covenant, isn't it? And that's another example, isn't it?
Very much so. Yeah. So you do, So we do have these kind of contemporary challenges, that it's hard in a society built around contracts, to keep covenant with each other. It's easier for a tyrannical government to break covenant with the people whilst they are in these, autonomous relationships, and easy for government to break with the people if the people don't keep to them to keep with the government. So something like the NHS in this country, which is very much part of the covenanted relationship that people have with the health service. It's more than, we pay our taxes, therefore we get this. It's something that this is something that is fundamental to our way of being in our society. But actually, the government is not finding it so difficult to tear it apart and to shift it and change it. And so the more we are unorganized, disorganized set of autonomous individuals, the harder it is to deal with a repressive state. And I think we should. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay. Let's then have a look at. I just realised I haven't probably. Can you see? No, have I shared this or have I?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. What am I doing? Okay. Oh, I did open. Okay, so let's have a look at Hosea. These 1 to 9 and 11. Okay, miss out verse 10 because it's a bit of a erroneous verse. So here's a very famous passage, a very beautiful passage. Maybe somebody would like to read it, but it's a good kind of indicator of the nature of the covenant that Israel, as Harley's been saying, you know, the biblical covenant that God has with Israel. Come on, you've been away for 2 weeks, Harley.
All right, I'm reading. All right. Don't shoot. So this is Hosea 11, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more I called them, the more they went from me. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and offering incense to idols. Yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up in my arms, but they did not know that I healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with bands of love. I was to them like those who lift infants to their cheeks. I bent down to them and fed them. They shall return to the land of Egypt, and Assyria shall be their king, because they have refused to return to me. The sword rages in their cities, it consumes their oracle priests and devours because of their schemes. My people are bent on turning away from me. To the Most High they call, but he does not raise them up at all. How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? How can I make you like Admah? How can I treat you like Zeboim? My heart recoils within me, my compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my fierce anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim, for I am God and no mortal, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come in wrath. They shall come trembling like birds from Egypt, and like doves from the land of Assyria, and I will return them to their homes, says the Lord.
Right. I mean, just
I got my Bible and read it again.
yeah, it's easy with your Bible in front of you, I think.
Yeah, a little bit. So I'll mute for now.
What does it tell us about covenant relationships?
They're not
Sorry. Go ahead, Neil.
Sorry, it's not. There's the relationship is built on love, and the kind of the instigator of the relationship is the one who loves the most, if that's the right way of putting it. I don't know if it is, because God is the one who instigates the covenant, and Israel responds. It's not like Israel goes to God and says, "Oh, can we have a covenant, please?" God says, "This is I'm here. This is my relationship with you," and kind of leaves it in their hands to have the power. So I suppose, okay, I guess something that's going on here is that you kind of abdicate power to the other party, in a sense. That may be too strong, but you're allowing the other party to have control in a way that in a contract you wouldn't. If this is a contract, then God would say, "Well, you've broken the contract. See you then." But that can't happen here, which means it's easy to be abused in a covenant relationship. But you don't then stop, you just carry on.
I mean, the love behind it is intense, isn't it? In the passage, you know, Israel was a child. I love it. Very feminine language at the beginning, you know. And Israel was a child. Out of Egypt I call my son. Out of, you know, out of slavery, I called my son. The more I called them, the more they went. I mean, there's a pain in there, isn't there? There's a mother's anguish in that. You know, why doesn't he get his hair cut? But always the relationship is always being repaired.
Mm.
No, it's not, oh, therefore you've done this, therefore we end this friendship, you know.
Mm.
You've done this, therefore we repair this friendship. You know, we have to rebuild, or we have to strengthen it. We have to do something to.
It's unconditional love, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely unconditional. Yeah.
Yes. And what it makes me think of, I don't want to overblow this, but I worked for a time in a school for students with extreme behavioural needs, and a lot of times the shared experience was that they had at birth been separated in some way from their mother, and not had that attachment. And we would always find with all the students that they would push when they first came to the school, and they usually came because they'd, you know, had a difficult time at other schools and were beyond the pale. Schools couldn't cope with them anymore. And we found that there'd be a couple of weeks where they were the most beautifully behaved young people you could expect, because they thought that was the only way it could be. But when they discovered that that they could actually, I don't know how to put it, but they could kind of abuse their position in a way, then they'd become utter nightmares. And it would go through another stage. And sometimes there's horrible physical violence and all sorts of things would happen. And it would be quite scary at times. But when you didn't then go away, then you got a new stage of relationship, of trust.
Yeah.
That wasn't there before. And it didn't always happen that way. I'm kind of being a little bit oversimplistic about it, but a lot of times it did. And I remember saying to one student who's now a sergeant in the police force, you know, he said, "Why won't you go away?" I said, "Because we don't." And that then just changed everything in that relationship. He could then trust that I wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
And you need to know as a human being, don't you, that you've got that somewhere.
Yeah. Knowing someone's there, giving that love is important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going through it, I mean, you get that first couple of stanzas there, which is all about the love, and then, you know, what they do wrong, which is the sacrifices to Baal, and because they've refused to turn to me, actually bad things are going to happen, and you know, all of this the sword rages in the city, it consumes the oracle priests, devours them because of their schemes. People are bent on turning away from me. To the Most High they go. Most High is probably a corruption of the word Baal. It's not referring to Yahweh. It's referring to the gods they're following. But he does not raise them up at all. You know, so the false gods are proving, you know, wrong. And then, you know, this kind of prophecy of divine judgments, you know. But you know, these two cities, Admah and Zeboim, are two cities that were destroyed with Sodom and Gomorrah. And you know, so there is that kind of, you know, you would expect the threat, but it's not there. How can I treat you like that? My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. God can execute fierce anger, but God says he won't. He will not again destroy Ephraim. I am God and no mortal. So I am God, therefore I cannot punish as well as I can punish. That's a choice. And then this promise of a return. from exile, they shall come trembling like birds from Egypt and like doves from the land of Assyria, and I'll return them to their homes as the promise of return. Very beautiful passage.
What do you think God is saying to Israel at the moment?
Yeah. Yeah, how would you try it to Israel now?
Question.
Do you hand him over? Hand Israel over?
So if you say that again, Sue.
Would he hand Israel over? He says, I will not hand Israel. Will he hand
Right, yeah. Will he hand it over?
Mm.
I think there's a kind of thing about the nature of a covenant with God as opposed to covenant between people. I mean, we talked about the covenant that people assume the land of Israel, the covenant that people assume in a part of covenant that people make with each other around an ideology and so on. But the covenant that is made with God means that you can trust. You've got another level of covenant. You've got the covenant that you make with each other, which are dangerous covenants because they could be exclusive or they could be built upon deception and misunderstandings of what's right. But the covenant that's made with God actually puts another level of check on that relationship. You're not bound purely by the nature of the covenant you've made with other human beings. You're also bound with another level of covenant, which is this covenant of love, which is made by God, and that changes the nature and the order of relationships.
Just thinking, this is why hell makes no sense. Because that completely undermines the covenant, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
It says, oh, well, there was a condition. You should have known all along.
Yeah.
So,
hell is not biblical.
No. Well, I know, but it's quite hard to argue against it sometimes. Someone's in your face defending it. Why anyone does, I don't know, but
Yeah.
But this just makes total sense. If God is saying, I'll never abandon you, then, and if we believe in the afterlife, then he never abandons us.
If you don't believe in the afterlife,
Then you're not, then you've got a different issue, haven't you?
I guess people can abandon God, but that's
that's right.
But actually means in practice is another question, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I get that. Of course, you can make your own hell. That's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just look at something else before we look at just maybe if we can just have a little bit of look at something from Hebrews. But let's look at this one. That's 54, isn't it? What thing? Where's that? Oh, here. 54, 1 to 54. 51, 34. Just to read this passage. Oh, I'm wrong. Oh, Jeremiah 34, 31 to 34. What's wrong with that? No verses in the let me just go. What? Doesn't exist? No.
No, I'm sure it does.
Oh, I keep going wrong here. I keep going wrong.
Breaking news, they removed the book of Jeremiah from the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it was an error all along. It was an error. Did you believe that? It was an error.
What's that?
That's all right. I'm being silly.
I've obviously got the. Oh, I know what I'm doing. Sorry.
There are 54 verses there, isn't it?
It's I put the wrong chapter. It's just exactly this. 31 to 34. Yeah, Jeremiah does exist. Yeah, there we are.
Yes.
Okay. So if we read this one, I'd like to read this one, and just think about what this means for the covenant. And think about the new covenant as a resource as something that is active and proactive on God's part. Would you like to read it?
Shall I do this one?
Yeah, please.
Okay with that, Harley? The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant that I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, the covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, says the Lord. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall they teach one another or say to each other, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity and remember their sin no more.
What I mean, yeah. What's he saying about the nature of about our relationship with God, and what covenant means now for us?
Almost romantic, though.
Yeah.
I was the husband.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Mm.
I mean, Hosea calls Israel the child, and
Yeah.
here Jeremiah is calling husband and wife. It's
Mm.
very, very familiar relationship.
He's kind of saying, because you broke it before, I'm going to get closer to you.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
That's what the abuse was like in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, that one didn't work, so let's try this one.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Bon, I'm messing it up.
Yeah.
It implies it's more individual than the previous one. The previous one was more corporate. This is more with individuals, and that's open to Christian misrepresentation too. Thinking, well, that's actually our covenant. But it does imply that there's a difference in that sense, I think.
Well, they shall be my people. It's still, and they shall teach one another, to say. So there is still that sense of a corporate relationship. I mean,
Well, but it says no longer shall they teach one another.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Quite right.
Yeah.
No longer shall they teach one another. It says, but they shall all know me. So they don't need.
They don't need that.
It isn't that they're going to learn for themselves without anybody's help. It's that they already know. Yeah. They should all know me, from the least to the greatest. I mean, this is a very inclusive community. I will forgive their iniquity. So, I mean, I think it's within the covenant. If the covenant isn't going to be broken, and if the covenant is an enduring relationship rather than a contractual relationship, then you have to look, when things go wrong, at how you strengthen that, how you repair it, and how you keep it. And I think maybe they're the elements that are missing from contemporary society. How do you, when things are going wrong in the society, how do you strengthen the relationship? Things are going wrong in the English Channel. I mean, boats should not be crossing the English Channel. No question about that. No one should be getting inside a boat. So something's gone wrong within the covenantal relationship between countries, between Europe and Afghanistan, Europe and Syria, Europe and Ethiopia. Something's gone wrong within those countries, and something's gone wrong between the countries. So how do you strengthen a relationship rather than defend yourself against it? How do you repair it? Which is not to say, we don't want to know you. We don't have an obligation to you. We haven't got a contract, so you're there.
I think you probably start campaigning.
Yeah, and how do you keep that? How do you keep that relationship once you?
Well, the Labour Party is good on that, so they're good at campaigning.
Yeah,
you also.
You've got to,
Sorry.
Say we did wrong. You know, we did wrong
Yes.
to you, and we hope to do better. You know, and that's how relationships are strengthened.
Well, you asked that really dangerous question. What do you need?
Mm.
And you put yourself entirely in their hands.
Yes. What do you need from me now? Yeah. What will change things?
You put yourself in the place of vulnerability.
It's very hard work
Difficult
to change anything. It's
But
tough.
ultimately, I mean, what
Stores in the market, you've got to have leaflets, you've got to have people interested, young people especially.
true.
You have to have energy to make anything happen, to be honest.
But what
It's a
occurred to
hard job. It really is hard work.
I was listening to the so-called Prime Minister this afternoon was, you know, all the questions from the journalists is, well, what will you do if this fails, as it possibly will? And it was all about all the energy that was going to be put into defending it in the court. Well, why not put all that energy into what the people who are trying to cross the channel need in the first place? Why waste your time doing that?
Exactly.
So blind.
Yeah.
So narrow-minded. Such a waste of time. And in the end, all you're doing is enriching the lawyers who are already pretty rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a scary place to say to someone, what do you need? Because they could ask you for anything.
Yeah, of course.
And ultimately, that's the better solution, surely.
The only thing that you're not right on there, Neil, is that immigration lawyers are not highly paid.
No, okay, fair point.
Other lawyers are.
Government lawyers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, the government lawyers are.
Yeah, government
Yeah.
lawyers make lots of money. No,
Oh,
I
Yeah, that's
agree.
true. That's true. Yes, government lawyers.
The immigration lawyers are very poorly paid because there's no money in it.
Yeah.
That's why there's not many immigration lawyers.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Disaster, really.
So I think you know, I mean, we're beginning to see what are the implications of this understanding of the covenantal relationship that the nature and style of a covenantal relationship, and the relationship to a God who makes covenant with people. What are the implications for solidarity today? And you know, Sue is kind of hinting at, you know, not hinting at, saying our struggles for justice, you know, that are hard work. What does it say about those? You know, that those struggles for justice are actually the covenant. You know, they are part of the covenant. They are about how to strengthen our relationship with God, how to, not our personal relationship with God, but how we strengthen our community's relationship with God. So if the UK becomes fairer in the way it treats asylum seekers or people without a home, then if we have campaigned for that and succeeded, then we have strengthened the UK's relationship to God. Whether or not people go back to the Church of England or not, you know, we have strengthened that covenant relationship, which is rooted in justice and righteousness.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But it's a long way off, Dawn.
You keep saying it, but you're right. It's hard work.
Yeah,
Yes.
really hard work.
But I still think it makes a difference.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with you.
It makes a difference to know that what you're doing is not just about an ideology, you know.
Yeah.
It's not just about my political party against their political party, or my social class against theirs, or my ethnic group against theirs, you know, or whatever, or women against men. It's not about just claiming my autonomous right as an individual to be what I want to be, And if I'm a woman, I have the autonomous right as a woman to be this. I have the autonomous right as a gay man to live in a particular way. I have an autonomous right, you know, as a black person to have a position of authority, whatever. I mean, all of those things are not bad things, but they're limited. You know, they don't really shift the nature of the society. They help individuals and enables individuals to advance. But if you say no, what we're really doing is strengthening our relationship with a God with whom, you know, no one is outside God's covenant. No one is outside of that. And the covenant with Israel is a kind of model for us. And then spend all our time readjusting, because in a covenant relationship, this is something we haven't said, in a covenant relationship, you have to readjust your identity. So, you know, if my behavior, you know, as in a particular way, is inhibiting the flourishing of other human beings, then in a contractual relationship, you just say, okay, well, we don't have that relationship. You know, we just walk away from that. In a covenanted relationship, you have to adjust your identity. So you have to become somebody with the other person or the other communities, the other groups.
To compromise a bit, do you think?
Compromise, grow,
understand,
learn, understand, you know, be wiser, you know, change your behavior, you know.
Isn't the ideal that you're seeking the other person's good?
Yes.
So you're looking at them and saying, what's good for you? What's the best thing for you? It might not always be the thing they think they want or need or whatever, but you're looking at them and you're thinking what that is. And if we're truly in a covenant relationship with God, this sounds peculiar, but what is the best thing for God? You know, and all he requires of us is that we worship him. But that doesn't mean singing choruses 5 times on a Sunday morning, does it? Worship is about the way you live your life. So the best thing for God is to live the life that he wants me to live.
What is it in Revelation? Worship and honor, glory and power, isn't it? Be unto him.
Yeah.
Who sitteth upon the throne. Worship and honor. Yeah, so it's not just worship, it's honor, it's glory, it's power. Yeah.
God has the power, not us.
But God, you know, we know that the God that we see in Jesus actually abandons that power.
But there's power in abandoning the power, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's a different kind of power. So it's knowing what kind of power we're talking about.
And we give the servant king the power if we become servants ourselves, I guess.
Yes.
I think I've said before, there's power with and there's power over and there's power alongside, and God's power isn't power over in that sense, I don't think.
No. This is deep stuff, isn't it?
Very powerful, isn't it? I'm not going to bother with the Hebrews passage because that would take us in another direction. But well, I mean, I think it, you know, it would take a little bit longer to unpack the next 4 minutes. But just summarizing it, I mean, how do you feel that where this takes us?
Well, Sue's right. It's hard work, but it's rewarding work. That's the thing, isn't it? That's perhaps what we can help each other to understand. There's such great reward in this.
And it gives a new context, I think, to the work for justice and solidarity. You know, it's not just, oh, you know, I'm on that side, you know, not their side, you know.
Yeah, there's a coming together, isn't there? Okay, really. Yeah.
You're quiet, Harley.
thinking.
Mm. When I was a school teacher, you know, if a kid wasn't paying attention, you say, call them out, and they say, "I'm thinking." I'm thinking. Well, they weren't doing their writing. I'm thinking.
It's probably true.
What they were thinking was another
Yes,
question.
exactly.
It does raise questions to me, as I've already implied, I think, about where Israel fits into this, the nation of Israel, given especially what's going on there at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. I think that's a really challenging question. But, I mean, it is a really challenging question because, you know, quite clearly, you know, they are claiming that this is the covenant, that they keep, they're claiming the covenant, they're claiming their right under the covenant. But actually, surely the covenant requires righteousness, it requires justice, it requires compassion, you know, so they are breaking the covenant, you know.
It's not just about the land, it's about how you conduct yourself as a nation and people. And
I think we should tell them.
And they're not strengthening, repairing, and keeping the covenant, you know, by what they're doing. I mean, they're
That's right.
They're denying everything that God has really talked about in the scriptures.
Yeah.
As is happening in the church as well.
Yes.
Yes, not just,
you know,
definitely.
Yes, absolutely.